United States. Now, this is not to say that just because a country is anti-imperialist that it's progressive. Indeed, both the Syrian and Iranian regimes are repressive and reactionary, in my view. The vast majority of the opposition, the active opposition to these governments, is homegrown and opposes U.S. imperialism as much as they do their own government. Indeed, the U.S. played a role. In other words, but it's important, despite this, to not kid ourselves about U.S. goals. They're not about democracy. Indeed, the U.S. played a role in overthrowing the last democratic governments those two countries had, in Syria in 1949 and in Iran in 1953. And I remember a famous speech by George W. Bush when he said, we want to spread democracy from Damascus to Tehran. And though I'm sure we all like to see greater democracy in Syria and Iran, he didn't talk about spreading democracy from Cairo to Riyadh, or from Tunis to Amman, or from Rabat to Manama. In other words, it seemed this push for democracy, so-called, was largely an excuse of undermining autocratic regimes that challenge U.S. interest, whereas dictatorships and occupying armies that we supported, that was somehow less of a problem. So as much as I would like to see the downfall of the Ba'athist regime in Syria and of the clerical rulers in Iran, it is not up to the United States to facilitate it. Indeed, I believe intervention by the United States would, and to some extent has already, backfired in strengthening those regimes and weakening progressive democratic forces in those countries. And I can address the internal resistance some in the question and answer period, but what I want to focus on in my prepared remarks primarily is U.S. policy towards Syria and Iran and the importance of avoiding war. And I'll start with Iran. There's recently been some progress towards a negotiated solution to the dangerous standoff between the two countries regarding Iran's nuclear program. Hardliners in Tehran are not happy with the recent rapprochement between the United States and Iran and related progress in negotiations to address Western concerns about Iran's nuclear program. But a bigger threat may come from hardliners in Washington, including prominent congressional Democrats. As a first step towards in de-escalation, there's a deal. The details are yet to be worked out, but the outline sounds like Iran would agree to strict safeguards to prevent the enrichment of uranium to the degree that it could be used for the development of nuclear weapons. In return, the United States would agree to a partial lifting of economic sanctions. Any further lifting of sanctions would depend on additional Iranian concessions. A bipartisan group on Capitol Hill, however, opposes even this modest first step. In fact, the group has been pushing legislation that would make such an interim agreement impossible. Now, the election of the moderate cleric Hassan Rouhani as Iran's new president this summer sent a message that the Iranian people wanted to end that country's isolation and improve relations with the United States, and by negotiating a mutually agreeable settlement. But unfortunately, rather than respond positively to Rouhani's election, the U.S. House of Representatives, just 2 days before Rouhani's inauguration in August, voted by an overwhelming margin, 400 to 20, to impose punitive new sanctions on Iran. They specifically targeted Iran's foreign reserves in an attempt to end all Iranian oil sales by 2015 with the goal of plunging that country into a debilitating economic depression. It was basically a bipartisan rejection of the new Iranian president's offer to enhance nuclear transparency and pursue peace and reconciliation with the West. Now, large groups